All right, Bill and Dave's Excellent Adventure, take one. Hey, welcome back to the Mastering Rod Building podcast, everybody. We're delighted that you joined us for this episode because today's going to be crikey fair dinkum. We're going to have a chin wag with a bloke who's done some serious hard yakka to have a ridgy didge in top of the wazza visual wrap and weave software, even though he's a total yabo. All right, that's the worst Australian ever. I'm tempted to redo it and have a second take, but it won't be any better. And God bless you for smiling and laughing. My venerated guest today is none other than the man, the myth, the legend behind the visual wrap and visual weave software, one of the partners at threadcentral.net, the Australian legend, David Boyle. Good day, mate.
G'day, Bill. How's it going? It's a
It's
pleasure to be
going
here.
very well. Thank you. That's my a few years ago. I'll give people context. A few years ago at ICRBE, I'm a big fan of Dave's, and he's a wonderful guy. And gotten to know him and his son Finn, who's a lovely bloke as well. And these guys are completely fair dinkum. And David gave me a deck of cards that was like Australian slang and vocabulary, and I've been trying to sort of learn it, and that was my somewhat weak and forced attempt to trot it in front of the world. I'm sure I'm going to hear from the land down under for messing it up so bad, but I appreciate you bearing with me. So, David,
My
a
pleasure.
lot of you who are serious rod builders, especially those of you who are very serious about custom thread art, and I'm not talking about just the basics. I'm talking about very advanced absolute mastery level techniques with closed decorative cross wraps with color change and multi-layer weaves. Dave is the obviously the Australian and the man and the brains behind visual wrap and visual weave software, which he launched in 2002. One of the really interesting things about this is at the time that Dave launched that software, he was the only rod builder he knew. So he was kind of, on an island, and obviously that's changed. He's gotten to be a significant part of the rod building community and just a wonderful force for good, among our, all these events. Dave, you have attended and presented at multiple events, ICRBEs, Rod Guild, NERBS events, all around the country. You actually headed up and single-handedly kind of ran the Learning Center at ICRBE 2023, which was a wonderful addition to the ICRBE and a great asset to everybody who went to the show. So if you watched any of those seminars, if you test drove any of the equipment, that's all David's brainchild. We have him and Tom Kirkman to thank for that and bringing that to the expo. I thought it was great. And he is also, as I mentioned, sort of one of the principals, along with Mary McIntyre Christie, who is a Foundation Outdoor Group Pro staff member. They're the ones who run threadcentral.net, which we'll talk a little bit about today, but a wonderful resource for those either looking to initially learn these advanced thread wrapping and weaving techniques or to kind of hone and advance their craft, right? So, welcome, Dave. I'm delighted that you could find some time to join us.
Thank you, Bill, and thanks for the awesome introduction. I'm actually pinching myself that this is actually happening. And I, as you mentioned in the introduction, when I launched or when I was working on Visual App, I basically knew no other rod builders. I
Right.
had as a resource Clemens Custom Rod Thread Art,
You're right.
and I I remember the first custom rod I built um, was a small ultralight glass trout rod, and
Hmm.
on the first two casts, caught two fish with it, and I thought this is magic.
Oh yeah.
It was so good building the rod. It was so good using it.
Yep.
And I thought, how can I get better at this? And
Yeah.
used to visit the local fishing store down at Penrith, west of Sydney, close to where I lived in the Blue Mountains. And under the glass cover, there was a book, Custom Rod Thread Art
Yep.
by Dale Clemens. And I used to
Yep.
look at it, and it was intimidating. I was looking at it thinking, I've just built this basic rod. Do I even dare open this book of thread art? There's no way I'd be ever good enough to do this.
Right.
So I took the plunge, bought the book, and digested it and just could not get enough of it.
And the rest is history, right? And to your credit, there's a legendary story that Dale Clemens, his very first rod he ever built, he used a wood glue to try to glue the reel seat on, and in front of a bunch of buddies on an offshore fishing trip in Florida, the reel seat started spinning. So the fact that you caught fish on your first two casts and that the rod was functional, you're actually standing on the shoulders of Dale and have done, may he rest in peace, and have done better than he did on his first rod. So that's awesome. So I always ask all my guests, and I just think this is so fascinating, and how many common threads we have, but it's a little different for somebody coming from Australia, right? So we get some exposure to, but Australian anglers. Carl Jochimsen has been a really successful on the Elite Series Tour in the MLF, and there's a few others who've crossed over. But it's a giant island. You have access to the Great Barrier Reef. Like, how did you get into fishing in the first place, and how did that turn into rod building?
Yeah, certainly. So from a very early age, we lived near a lake near Newcastle, a lake called Lake Macquarie,
Okay.
saltwater lake.
Okay.
And my mum used to take me down to the local jetty there.
Okay.
I was 5, 6 years old,
Yeah.
and I'd fish from the jetty. I'd hardly ever catch anything, but it didn't matter. I just loved the concept of I can put a bait on a line, throw it in, and maybe come up with a big one.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was just like panning for gold, and it was
Oh
this
yeah.
awesome every time we went. Hardly ever caught anything, but for whatever reason, it was ingrained in my blood. I just loved to fish,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I've fished any time I've had the opportunity.
So you obviously love fishing and share that kind of like sense of adventure and all of it, and grew up doing it. How did you start building rods? Because I gotta believe it's kind of a rare thing for someone to start doing in the States, and I feel like we have more exposure here than I assume you have in Australia. So how did you even get into building rods in the first place?
Sure. So I used to jump on the train and go down to university in Sydney, and it was a 2.5 hour round or one-way trip once you added up the walking time.
Yeah.
I used to occasionally split that trip up if
Okay.
my lectures weren't happening straight away, and I'd jump off the train at Penrith and look around the shops, and typically I'd end up at Penrith Fishing Tackle. And while I was there, I got a magazine by Ian Miller
Okay.
called The Australian Rod Crafter,
Hmm.
and it was a magazine showing you step by step how to build a rod. And I thought, this is interesting. This looks like something I could be interested in. So I
Mm-hmm.
bought the magazine, and there were recipes in the back of the book. And so I ordered the blank that was in the first recipe. This was the ultralight blank, and
Okay.
it took, I don't know, 6 weeks for this blank to arrive. But I bought the blank, and I bought everything exactly as was specified in that recipe,
Yeah.
and I made this first rod, and I just loved doing it. I mean, my thread tensioner was a book,
Yeah.
running the thread through the pages,
Right.
and the spool was sitting in a glass, and I was basically wrapping it on the knees or a cardboard box with some V's in it,
Yeah. Yeah.
and all I needed to get started, and just loved doing it.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, you've come
It
a long
it
way.
was no, it's fine. And as I built that first rod, it was just like I was struck by lightning.
Yeah.
I can't explain it any other way. Do not know what the excitement was or the passion was, but it lit a spark.
Well, you don't have to
And
explain it to us. This is everybody listening's a rod builder, so we get it, man. That's awesome. Your enthusiasm is contagious. Like I'm getting excited while I'm sitting here listening to you. So obviously that's how you started. You are now like way out there on the highly advanced, highly technical, highly experienced, side of this thread art. And really it's fitting to me that you learned from the original source that so many of us learned from, the Dale Clemens custom thread art. And now we have a resource available like Visual Wrap and Visual Weave. So take me through that journey a little bit. We're going to spend the bulk of this episode getting into what Visual Weave and Visual Wrap, what that software does and how it helps you and what you can do with that. You also have a brilliant little invention, the wrap sticks, right? Like, so you have these tremendous resources for builders, but was this just an extension of that passion for rod building, or was it the thread art in particular, or like, how did you get so involved in the decorative thread aspects?
sure, I think what it boils down to is, at heart, I think of myself as a crazy inventor. I just
Mhm.
love making stuff. It
Yep.
doesn't matter what it is. I mean, my current hobbies include 3D printing and
Yeah.
electronics and software and websites. It doesn't matter what it is. I just love making stuff.
Yeah.
And so reading the advanced custom rod building and the custom rod thread art books by Dale, there were instructions on there on how to make rod stands. So I made
Hmm.
a set of rod stands, and
Right.
I loved the thread art book, and I just wanted to, in my mind, I wanted to be the ultimate thread artist in the world, because I did not know anyone else who was doing this, but
Right.
it felt like it was my little niche, and I
Yeah.
could become good at it. And I
Yep.
thought, okay, I started wrapping some patterns from the recipes in customized thread art,
Right.
and it took a long time.
Yep.
It could take me 6 hours following the recipe to find out patterns too big,
Too
colors don't
small, too
match,
compressed, too
too
elongated. Right.
small.
Yeah.
And I thought the only way I'm ever going to get ahead at doing this is to have a tool. You know,
Mm.
what would be the ultimate tool? I think it would be software. Um, Dale, in his book, talks about a common language.
Hmm.
And to his credit, he mentions in the book the way that people get ahead, and crafts and hobbies and endeavors get ahead, is they develop a way of communicating. Anytime you're left in isolation, you have to reinvent your wheel.
Hmm.
When you've got a common language to describe common concepts,
Yep.
that's when you can build upon, the shoulders of giants, and
Sure.
follow in footsteps without having to reinvent it.
Yeah.
So I looked at what he described as a common language, and I thought, man, that's a computer program right there.
There you go.
So um, I started practicing in my spare time. I got access to um, a programming language called Visual Basic,
Hmm.
and I was not a particularly good programmer, but I was determined, and I played and I played and I practiced, and I made a lot of mistakes along the way, and step by step worked out what I could do. The first thing I did was drew a straight line on the screen, and I thought that can represent a thread,
Yep.
and it all grew from there. You know, so um, it got to the stage where, as I'm adding more features, I'm thinking, oh, that's great, but what it really needs is a 3D viewer, and what it really needs is the ability to print true to size, and what it also needs is the ability to change colors, and one feature led to the other.
Right.
It's as if I started with an idea of what the whole software needed to be, because there was nothing to base it on. There
Yep.
was no existing software that I was aware of that I could copy or use as a reference.
There's still
These,
not. I mean, this is it. Yeah.
yeah. So I took the concepts that Dale presented. I massaged them into what I thought was needed. Um, Used my limited experience in building rods myself
Hmm.
to come up with what I thought was needed, and happy to say that 20 something years later, it's still going strong. It amazes me that software that I launched in 2002, today in 2024, is still viable.
Not only
It has a
viable, but sort of as relevant as ever, and probably an improved product, right? And so just that's fascinating to me that that's what you did. And you're not, so you have a full-time professional job, but as I understand it, you're kind of like a project manager type person, right? Like you're not a software engineer or a programmer. So this was like completely out of your wheelhouse to go do this in the thread art space, right? This is not like you do this all day every day for your real job, and then you just decided to turn that towards this. Is kind of like stepping outside your swim lane a little bit, right? Like,
Basically, yes. In my varied experience throughout my career, I've had some limited opportunities to get involved in programming. I was a control systems um, programmer for a short period of time. That was probably the kickstart that I needed, because it
okay.
put me in touch with guys who were programmers. And I used to go home, work on a feature that was needed, hit a brick wall, and go back to work, and say to my mate at work, "Oh, I'm trying to do this. How would you do it?" And he would say, "Oh, haven't you tried doing it this way?" I'd go home and try it, and sure enough, it'd work straight away.
Oh
So,
man.
again, standing on the shoulders of giants, collaborating, and that was probably the start too of me realizing that for any of us to get ahead in this, there's a need to collaborate. And
Absolutely.
as I say, I hardly knew any rod builders at the time.
Right.
Didn't have people I felt I could bounce the ideas off.
Sure.
When it came to the programming, I did, and so I did that, and that helped the software develop. But I guess
Absolutely.
that planted the seeds for the collaboration, which now manifests itself with the support that I give to people, Thread Central, um, collaborating with Mary on the website, and I guess teaching people. I was desperate for I was really hungry for resources.
Hmm.
Um, I had the magazine that I started with. I had customized thread art, and not many other resources. In Dale's book, he used to speak about rod crafters and their magazine. I remember writing letters back then and putting it in the post office box and hoping that the letter would get to America and never receiving a response, So it
Right.
probably got lost at sea or something. So I didn't have access to magazines or stuff
This country is an
to go on.
honorable democracy. We're trying to weed out and insulate ourselves from these penal colonies that do everything backwards south of the equator. Come on, we got to protect our way of life. We can't just let every piece of mail
I get
from
it.
down under in. Oh, that's
I
funny. So, hey,
get
just
it.
I feel the need to kind of tell people a little bit about what it is, right? So, it's fascinating to hear the origin of this, and you really hammered this thing together out of raw materials. That's fascinating to me. But if you're not, if you're familiar with the software, um, then this I'm not probably not telling you anything new if you've ever seen David demonstrate it at a weekend gathering, at a conclave, at an ICRB, anything else. But essentially this is software. You mentioned it, David, and I have done, and so I've always had this real personally, this real strong opinion that if you're going to hang out your shingle as a custom rod builder and you're going to be a consummate professional, a true craftsman, you need to be able to do everything. You need to be able to turn some wood, turn some grips, do some inlays with foam and wood. You need to be able to weave. You need to be able to do decorative closed thread wraps. You need to be able to master all these techniques. And that's always kind of been what's excited me is I love trying to develop and put all these tools in the tool chest, right? But the frustrating thing with this thread art is, and you can see it if you follow Mary McIntyre Christie's channel or anybody else's, these things can be hard to get right. And the more complicated you make them, the more subtle you try to make your fades, the more you try to hit certain contrasts and blends and things. It can be before visual weave and visual wrap, it's really impossible to know what you're going to get until you actually lay it out, try it, and see whether it sort of hits, right? And essentially, what we'll stick with the visual wrap for a second, but the same is true of the visual weave. Essentially, what this software lets you do that's brilliant is you can lay out your wrap. You can measure the diameter and the length of your blank where you're going to put this wrap. You can pick the colors out of a thread library of actual Gudbrand or Fuji or Madeira colors. You can literally in a 3D, and I'm going to get it wrong, but I'm just trying to get the point across to folks who haven't seen it. You're going to get a 3D rendering of the wrap that you've designed. And if it's right, then good. You're ready to go to press, lay it out, mark it up, get your thread, and start going up and down and with your passes and go to town. But if it's wrong, if it didn't quite look right, if you didn't get the contrast you wanted, if your fade wasn't quite where you wanted it, you're able to tweak that, correct it, and manage it, massage it through this software via a 3D rendering before you spend all the hours and go cross-eyed wrapping it on and burning the thread. And so, in theory, you could still try some things and still cut them off. But if you understand how to use this stuff, to me, the tremendous value of the visual wrap is a predictable result and the ability, number one, and the ability to sort of understand what you're getting yourself into without mistakes before you start. And the other thing is, as part of it, you also have these, I don't know what we would call them, like libraries or pattern packs, where you can see all these things that either you or others have designed and sort of granted access to. You have a host of thousands and thousands of patterns. Like I remember the Dale Clements book had probably, I don't know, I'd have to go back and look, 80 to 100 patterns or something like that. And that seemed dizzying. You've got thousands of patterns and color schemes and variations. And then on top of that, you can grab one of these patterns and say, well, what if I change this yellow to this orange or this purple to this red? You can literally, so talk to me about all the things the software can do. Because I've seen it, I've seen you demonstrate it. You're very eloquent in talking about it. And it's just an immensely, like, if I'm honest, I don't love doing closed decorative cross wraps. I do that because I feel like if I can't do that, I'm not really a true craftsman. I haven't mastered like a journeyman the whole, set of tools and skills that a rod builder should have. But so to me, to be able to use visual wrap and shorten and condense the layout time, the picking of colors and all that, and get that predictable result is invaluable. Right. But it's also a way you can share. You could create a pattern and say, hey, you talked to me about this theme you wanted. Here's what I'm thinking. How does this look? You can actually share once you're licensed in the visual wrap or visual weave and say, hey, I came up with the weave or the wrap that we talked about. How does this look? And so you have the ability to sort of have that negotiation and tweak it with the customer before you put 8 hours into, laying it out and wrapping it and packing it and perfecting it, right? So and I'm scratching the surface, but talk us through a little bit all how all it does and how you recommend people use it.
Certainly. And I think you've hit on all of the major features, which is great. So you must have been listening to some of those seminars I gave, Bill. But
I try. It's very hard for me to understand most of the words that are coming out of your mouth, you drongo, because you don't speak proper American English, y'all. But
calm
I'm
down,
just
mate.
kidding. No, you speak very eloquently about it. And and that's the thing I want to make sure people get. It's a tremendously powerful tool if this is the kind of work you want to do. It can shorten your learning curve
Sure.
by thousands of hours and by spools and boxes and spools of thread, right?
Yeah, sure. So, and you're right. The idea with visual wrap, it's in the name, visual wrap.
Mhm.
Visualize what you want to wrap before you get there.
Right.
And so recently I built a small rod as a gift for a friend,
Hmm.
and I've made a split grip. It's a
Hmm.
spinning rod with a split grip, and
Uh-huh.
there's a gap in the split grip where I wanted to put a pattern.
Hmm.
So the first thing I said was, okay, what's the nature of the pattern I want to do? I had a look through the libraries that were available, and none caught my fancy. I wanted to design something that matched the weave. I'm using these woven carbon fiber grips, which
Mm.
I'm new to the party. I'm late to the party for carbon fiber stuff, but
Right.
these things look hot in my
Right.
opinion.
Oh
So
yeah. Oh yeah.
I wanted a wrap that's either accentuated or complemented these grips, and there was nothing available in the off-the-shelf libraries. So I spent a little bit of time and designed a wrap. Probably took me 20 minutes to do that. So I got the general concept of the colors I wanted to use
Mhm.
and the nature of the pattern. Once I had that, the next step was, okay, how do I size that to suit my rod?
Mhm.
And so once the um, pattern script, and all patterns are described by scripts. A script is nothing more than some computer language to describe to the software where to put threads, what colors to use,
Right.
and how to put
How many,
subsequent.
how far apart, all that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
It's a necessary evil that we have these scripts, but it's just the way it is.
Right.
So once I had the scripts designed, I then measured the space that I had available in the split grip and decided I wanted to hide the ends of the wrap under the grip itself, so I didn't have end wraps showing. So I ended up with an overall length. So using the software, told it, I experimented with the number of pattern repeats. The thing about cross wraps is they repeat as you go up the rod, and the
Right.
more repeats you have, the more similar versions of the same pattern you get going up the rod, and
Right.
it takes up more space. So an important decision up front is how many repeats should your pattern be? Because if you have too
Yeah.
many repeats, it either won't it'll go over the space you have available, or it'll look out of proportion to the size rod you're building.
Yeah.
So I used the software to tell me or show me how it would look both in 2 dimensions and 3 dimensions with a certain number of repeats. I came up with what looked approximately right, and then I went to the window that shows me where to put the measurements in for the butt and tip diameters of where the wrap is going to go. And then it basically does some calculations, manipulates some graphics, and allows me to then do a printout on paper of what the pattern is going to look like in the right colors and at the right size. Once I had that printout, I cut that printout out and curled it around the blank, and it showed me exactly how the pattern was going to look. It was a mock-up,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
To get to
A
that stage,
visually accurate, true to size, proportionate to scale, like mock up. Like if I follow the script, if I follow the instructions, and we'll talk a little bit about what you get as instructions once you put the pattern in. Um, but it's very similar to what you've got in the Dale Clemens book, first pass this, second pass this, plus one, drop one. I mean, again, there's the common language you need to understand, but there's an index and a glossary, and you can understand it very simply. And yeah, it's just, it's remarkable how quickly you can lay something out and how much tweaking and perfecting you can do without wasting hours and hours in thread. And it can be tedious. That's what I don't like about it. It just takes a long time, right? And my eyes get tired, and then they always seem to turn out better if I do it in one sitting. But man, it's hard to find a chunk of time where I can sit down and do it in one sitting, And so just the software really, really helps to me in that regard.
And this is probably not as relevant for those listening on the podcast, but here is a
Oh,
view
he's showing us
of the
the actual wrap. Oh wow, look.
here's I get the focus to work, right?
Yeah,
Here's the mock-up that was done in paper, and here's the actual wrap on the rod. And obviously there's a slight variation in the colors just due to the actual threads that I chose to use. But I came up with probably a half a dozen of these mock-ups,
man, it
and I
looks
tried
actually
different
better on the
colors.
rod even than it does on the mock-up. That wrap looks sick, man. I love the way there's no tie off and it's just emerging from the grips. That's awesome.
So that whole process of designing the wrap itself was probably 20 minutes, and there was probably 10 or 15 minutes of coming up with these little swatches.
Yeah.
I actually ran it past my wife because
Of course,
um,
yeah. Yep.
colors, me, no.
Yeah.
But my wife um, told me which was the best color combination. And I didn't go with that. I went with this one instead.
Oh, hey,
It's-
hey, don't get me in the middle of that. It's funny. I think you know him too, but he's a friend of mine, Jared Taylor, who's a firefighter in Indiana and a really good rod builder. And he does some really cool color combinations and matching like custom anodized Able fly reels and all this stuff. And I'd always kind of loved his colors and would occasionally reach out to him and be like, man, I need to do this gold and maroon and orange or whatever, but I'm not feeling it. And what do you think? How would you do it? And we kind of spitball ideas back and forth, and he always had these great ideas. And then I come to find out he's colorblind. And he would just go to his wife, Carly, and be like, "Hey, what colors?" And I was like, "Oh, you dirty dog!" But so yeah, now I just cut him out and go straight to his lovely wife. And but Mike Garone is another guy who, and I know he uses this software and is a great proponent of it and has done a bunch of work with it. And he does such a great job coming up with colors. He's like partially colorblind. So look, however, which makes me wonder, is that like why he's coming up with some of these combinations that others of us don't think of that end up looking beautiful, but I would never put together until I see him do it, right? Or until I tested it out on something like this software. And I just think that's what's so cool about it is you have this limitless kind of design and layout horsepower at your fingertips, and it doesn't cost you all the hours and all the thread and all the sore hands from packing and all the crossed eyes from trying to. And I keep bringing that up, but the older I get, that's the harder part, right? You want a pattern that really has high resolution, really pops and looks great. You need to use the smallest threads you can. Well, man, those are fatiguing to be looking at and packing and justifying and straightening and doing all that stuff. But so talk to me a little bit about let's walk people through. So you go through this process, which for you only took the 20 minutes. You came up with this awesome pattern, and those look like the bats and seafoam kind of colored grips, which are it's a really unique color. I haven't seen those before. They look great. And they also have some blanks that are in that same seafoam that match it, right? But so you laid out your pattern, you got the colors, you tweaked it, you asked your wife, then you ignored what she said. That feels like that's going to come back on both of us. We're probably on the naughty list, but I'm just going to gloss over that for the moment.
Used to
Um,
that.
so and then you wrapped it all on but what you get as an output of the process is not only what you're referring to as the swatch, which for those of you who can't see, and most of you are just listening via podcast format, we'll eventually put this up on YouTube and you'll be able to see it. But he's literally printed out a little swatch, almost like you'd use a piece of snake skin or abalone or something to lay out on the blank, where you can actually take the paper, true to color, true to size, wrap it around the blank and see what it's going to look like. So you get that, which the visualization of your wrap, right? Which is amazing. But then you also get sort of the instruction list of, okay, if this is the pattern you want, here's how you execute it, right? Talk to me a little bit about that and how to understand and translate the instructions.
Yeah, so the interesting thing about the swatch or the true to size printout that the software generates is that it does account for the taper of your rod.
Yep.
So that the big challenge that people seem to have with closed wraps is you can't use a constant spacing between centers if you want your wrap to close nicely. You'll find that at the tip end, the threads bunch up because there's too many threads in a limited space. At the butt end, at the same time, there'll be gaps in the threads because you've got the same number of threads, but with the same spacing, you can't get the surface areas right.
Right.
So
Yeah.
what the software does, a lot of people talk about taper offset spacing, the
Mhm.
algorithm. So you can calculate how to vary your spacings as you go down the blank according to the actual size of your blank. If you've got
Mhm.
a radical taper, then you need to make radical step changes in your spacings,
Right.
and the less tapered it is, the less changes there are required. The software generates a table, a spacing table, which is your
Mhm.
traditional output from any of the Excel spreadsheets you have available, or the app, the taper offset app that myself and my son put out. The software generates that. You also have spacing tables in books, but for me, they make a number of assumptions. They assume that your cross wrap is centered. Each pattern repeat appears in the center of the repeat. It also assumes that you're using a square pattern, which means your threads are crossing at right angles.
Right.
What happens if your spacing is elongated
Or
or
compressed. Right. Yeah.
not centered? Yes.
Right.
So the visual printout accounts for all of that. And not only does it show you how long it's going to be, but you can limit the printout to just the layout threads. Anyone who's done any number of cross-wrap patterns knows that the most important part of your pattern is the layout threads. If you get that right, you're well on the way to executing a nice closed wrap. If you start with spacing that is off, good luck packing all the way through the wrap trying to
You
fix
can't.
it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So
And like I think I understand the math and I sort of get it, but I've still had trouble with that. That is still to me the hard part. And if I miss a wrap, it's usually because I somehow made some kind of mistake in my taper offset space. It's all in the layout, right? And getting the layout really precise. Then it sort of follows on easily from there, but it can be harder than you think without a tool like this to get the layout exactly right. And to be clear, the system isn't magic. What Visual Wrap's going to do is ask you for certain information, which you input for each specific blank, each specific wrap area length, and all that. So it literally is not a one size fits all, David. It literally, you are designing it, laying it out to a specific blank. You input accurate measurements, you're going to get an accurate layout instruction list for exactly how to execute that wrap on that particular blank.
that's right. So your destiny is in your own hands there.
Yeah,
We have any cross wrap is a collection of straight lines, basically.
right.
And where you put those lines, those threads on your rod, determine what the pattern's going to look like.
Yep.
Um, you have the ability to come up with your own patterns. You also have the ability to open up patterns, a library of patterns which have been created by others. Billy has come up with a whole bunch of patterns which have gone into the pattern packs. There were other contributors. I think Milt Dorena was another strong contributor to the pattern packs.
Yeah, so
Various people
he's
at the time.
referring to Billy Vivona, who's a rod builder and kind of founder of the Nerbs, and Milt Durena, who's a guy down here in Alabama country, local to us, and a great friend to the Anglers Resource crew. But yeah, so sorry, keep going. I just want to cross reference for people who may not know.
No worries. And when the software was launched, my thought was people will take this software and they will share patterns everywhere, because once they have the ability to create their own patterns, they will just naturally share it. And I guess the resources we have available will just mushroom and explode. And that's what I thought.
Yep.
Um, yeah, another one of my thoughts that didn't eventuate. I found that people, to be brutally honest, people were quite intimidated by this scripting language. Like,
Yeah.
"Oh, what does it mean? You've got lines of script on a screen and you expect me to put that on the rod? Like what?"
No.
So we worked out pretty soon that unless we provide the patterns for people, then we're limiting its availability for 90% of people
Yeah.
to use.
It's not
So
accessible enough. Right. Yeah.
that's right. So the good thing about it is it's very easy to share patterns. These pattern packs are basically hundreds of patterns that are available that you can draw on. And I've published some index books, which is basically a picture of what each wrap looks like.
Yeah.
So you open up the index book, you scroll through, you think, I like the look of that one. What's its number? It's CRTA 56. So you open that particular script up, you press wrap, it prints on the screen, and you think, I like it, but it should be blue instead of red. So you just change the red threads to a blue thread, bang,
Right.
it changes it. So there's an amount of easy customization that anyone can do without having to know the scripting language.
Well,
So long
and
as,
you've gone so far as to get like accurate renderings of all these colors. Like you're doing a ton of work. Like I know when we released new Fuji thread colors last year, we sent you samples and you actually get those, whatever you do your magic, whatever you're however you're mapping it, cross-referencing to get it to where it will render accurately. And that's not just true of Fuji threads, it's all the threads that you have in the library, which is basically all the threads that there are. I mean, you're getting a very accurate color rendering of what you're going to do. Yeah.
yeah, so it's as close to reality as is physically possible at the moment.
Yeah.
So once people have the pattern they like and the colors they like, if they can get their head around how to size it, then they're on their way to wrapping, as well as showing you the layout positions of the threads. The one thing, probably the main motivating thing that drove me to write the software is the Clemens book presented around 100 recipes
Mhm.
of patterns, and a recipe consisted of a sketch or a photo of where the layout threads would be, and then so they were your layouts, and then some instructions about the progression. So the progression is, how do you change the layouts, or where do you put the next
The
layouts relative
sequence
to
of
the
up and
previous
back. Yeah,
layouts
right. Yeah.
sequentially each time. And in my head, like I would look at, for example, the heart pattern,
Hmm.
and you start with some crosses that form an approximate box, and the final pattern is a curved heart. How does that work? Like
Right.
I
Yeah.
just could not get my head around straight lines equals curves. It's just,
Right. Yeah.
and of the limited number of patterns that I wrapped, you could be three-quarters of the way through the pattern, it would still look nothing like the end result according to the book, and I would start to lose confidence about, have I made a mistake or what.
Right. Right.
The good thing about the software is you can step through sequentially on the screen.
And say, I'm halfway. What does it look like halfway? Okay, I'm right. This is what it's
Exactly,
supposed to look like. I haven't made a mistake. Yeah. Because often
exactly.
those
So
those mistakes,
it's
if you make them, don't show until the finished product, and then you're like, I'm not even sure where I did made the mistake. Now I got to take the whole thing. Yeah, it can be more tedious to back up and start partway through again than it is to just cut it off and start over, right? And I just, again, if you follow what the software tells you to do, once you understand how to use it, it's just it's I won't go so far as to say Drongo proof, but it's pretty close, right? Like it makes life really, really easy on you. And just the speed, the haste, right? Like I might go 6 months without doing a cross wrap. And then I need to jump right back in and do it. And I've sort of forgotten the things I learned from the last one I did to be able to mock it up, size it out, everything perfect, tweak the colors. Like it's just extremely valuable. And if you're trying to do this to make money, your time is the most valuable thing. It's often the rate limiting factor. And it takes just as much time to build a cheap, inexpensive rod as it does a really high-end rod. And certainly this kind of thread art can help you command a very high price and likewise demonstrate mastery. When you can execute these very complicated closed wrap patterns with side patterns and shading and contrast and boxing, I mean, it's truly art. And it will command a price. Um, Not that that's what it's all about. I mean, I'm kind of with you. It's the joy of doing it, and I love the way you described it. Is it was like being hit by lightning, and you're just kind of like never the same after you built the first one. I love that description. I'm going to use that. That's what it feels like. But this is not just true of cross wraps. You also have visual weave. And at risk of simplifying, visual weave is, and I'm going to take a stab at it and you keep me honest, Dave. Visual Weave is the same software as Visual Wrap, but specifically for multi-layer color change weaves, right? So it lets you create your pattern on a grid. Like when I was used to be doing these weaves, we literally drew it on graph paper, right? But this lets you kind of pixelate it and put it on a grid, and with each thread being, one square, it lets you set up multiple layers and color change or do a single color. And then it generates not only a visual rendering of what the wrap's the images or weave's gonna look like, but it also generates what we call the left list, which is the instructions that you use to complete a weave. And so essentially, let's just say I'm running my main thread. Most of us run it from left to right, or let's just say it's from the butt to the tip of the rod, left to right as I look at it. If I put a thread left and then do a turn of the standing thread, and then I bring that thread back right, that is a thread that's going to show. It's going to be on top of that winding thread. So your instructions, if you will, your recipe in a weave is called a left list. And so, if I was to dramatically oversimplify, what Visual Weave does is let you create your own pictures, tweak colors, tweak size, and all that, and gives you the left list. That alone would be worth doing. But it also does a lot more, right? So maybe you're not sure how long or how broad. If you've ever done an elaborate weave and then you wind up doing it and it's too big and it wraps around the rod and you sort of don't get to see the whole pattern, you're like, I messed that up. It was too big. Or maybe you're trying to decide whether the orientation will be parallel to or perpendicular to the axis, right? Which way do I want my pattern to go? How big or how small does it need to be to sort of show the level of detail I want? Visual Weave does all of that for you.
That's right. And again, you've hit on all the major features there. And in your introduction, you mentioned that any rod builder with their salt should be at least experienced in all aspects of rod building. You've got, binding on guides. You've got maybe turning grips. In Clement's books, he spoke about weaving. And
Mhm.
for me, when I was just getting into rod building, I thought, oh man, there's cross wraps and there's weaves. Oh man, this is awesome.
Mhm.
So I started with the visual wrap,
Mhm.
built that, and for me that was almost enough.
Yeah.
And it was gnawing at my brain that I had produced a what I thought was a high quality, world class product
Mhm.
um,
I agree.
to do to do probably half of the job of thread art, and it was I just could not sleep at night thinking the weave part is not done.
Yeah.
And I pushed through, and I mean it took me 5 years of part-time work to get wrap written. This was during having kids
Sure.
and starting a family as well. I then pushed through and spent another 5 years of part-time work working on weave, and um, managed to launch the second product, Visual Weave. So as you described, it allows you to import a graphics file, a picture, a photo or a sketch that you've done, as long as it's a JPEG or a PNG file or a bitmap.
Right.
Import any graphics file, orient it on your rod. Do you want it, as you said, vertical, horizontal, etc. Size the pattern to the available space you have on your rod, and then tell the software what size threads you're going to use. And it works out, okay, for those size threads, if you want it this space, this is how big the grid needs to be. So it does
Yeah.
those calculations. It creates a grid. It then automatically populates the grid with its best approximation of what the image should look like. And what you'll find is anytime you import an image, it's an approximation. You then need to tidy it up and smooth out the rough edges,
Right.
spend some time working on the grid, use the exact colors that you want, and then produce the left list. And
Yep.
then once you've got the left list, you can print that out and walk away, go up to your rod, start weaving according to the left list. And if you've done it right, and if I've coded the software right, the finished size and look of the pattern will be as it was predicted on the screen.
Yeah. Which is just like, oh my gosh. If you talk to Doc Ski, if you talk to Jim Upton, and I'm deliberately pulling forward legendary color change weavers. If you talk to Jeff Vatican, who taught me how to do it. And literally, like, kind of like you, Dave, in the beginning, we had the books, right? And we were sort of self-taught, and I could not get. I'm a visual person. It's maybe part of why this software appeals to me so much and is so effective for me. But I think a lot of us are. But I could not understand the concept of a multi-layer color change weave. I just couldn't quite make it click. I could read all the words. I knew what they all meant, but I just couldn't ever do it. Then Jeff sits me down at a rod show in Nashville that Tom Kirkman actually hosted way back pre ICRBE. And as soon as I saw it, it was like, aha, I got it, right? And it all the tumblers clicked into place and I understood. But it's like, and you talk about sizing. I mean, there's some serious magic to proportions and sizing and getting this all right. I would say as much as in the proper layout of closed decorative cross wraps, even if you have a good pattern, the art of knowing how big to make it and the proportion of it. And like, I know I won't reveal any secrets, but I know like Doc Ski even gets into the very specific diameter of the threads he's using this way versus the threads he's using as his standing thread to get it sort of framed up in proportion. So there's just this one may be more than even the visual wrap. It's so hard to me. You have to get lucky or have be very experienced and have made a lot of mistakes to be able to size it right every time. Visual Weave takes all that away, and immediately you can get the exact thing you want from a rendered image or from a library, and then you can clean it up, generate the left list, you're off and running. And again, you can check as you go to make sure it looks right and you haven't gotten sideways with something. It's just a it still requires skill and attention to detail and work, right? And some of these folks that will start a weave and walk away from it and come back the next day and finish, like I'm not sure I can do that. Like I know I should be able to trust the left list. That makes me really nervous, right? But um it's hard to explain to people who haven't done a bunch of this how much this software simplifies and reduces stress and worry and gives you it's almost like cheating. I mean, you still have to be able to do the work and execute it, and thread tension's got to be right. You got to pack it. You got to, there's still a lot of tricks of the trade, but just the ability to size patterns, flip the orientation, and see everything before you have to put the work in to see whether it turned out right or not, whether it was elongated or compressed, or it's just tremendously valuable to me. So
And what the way I think of it is it's one step in the process.
that's right.
So
Yeah.
get, for example, getting for visual wrap, getting your layout threads in the right place is important. And
Yeah.
similarly for visual weave, getting the right threads in the right locations to start with is important.
Yep.
It's up to you to apply the right tension and to lay things at the right angle.
Yeah.
It's a tool that can help you achieve the right result.
Yeah.
It's not a magic bullet. A lot
Right.
of people ask me, is the software easy to use? And for me, it is obviously,
Yeah.
but
It's very easy to use. You still got to go do the work, meaning
exactly. But
execute the wrap. Yeah.
it's like anything. There's a learning curve, and it's like this for rod building as well. The more you do it, the better you become. You pick
For
up
sure.
tips and tricks. You
Absolutely.
develop muscle memory, and
Right.
you start doing things automatically without even thinking about it. Whereas when you first start, you don't know those intricacies of
Sure.
what is required.
Yeah.
So I like to think of the software as being a step in the process of achieving really excellent results, but simply having the software isn't the end result, isn't a guarantee of 100% success on all the wraps or weaves you're going to do, but it used properly is certainly a huge step in the right direction.
Yep. And so, couple of other kind of frequently asked questions, right? So, um, what will it run on? It's sort of set to run on PC, right? And basically works great on Windows XP. If you're using older versions, Win 7 through Win 11, you may have to make a couple of tweaks, couple of settings to make it work, but it's very simple. You walk everybody through all this as part of the support. You also offer support, you have these, can we talk a little bit about the Facebook and the other user groups? Because you've got a, don't let me leave anything out, right? Because you've obviously, you can see everything we're talking about. And if you're interested in purchasing this and it's a download, right, you can get it at www.threadcentral.net. There's also some great clothing and apparel, which for those of you who, if we watch a YouTube version, Dave is sporting some of today, which looks great. You've got all Mary McIntyre Christie's courses there, some tools there. So lots of resources there at threadcentral.net. But there's also a Facebook visual wrap users group, right? And then you have channels on YouTube. You personally have channels, right, for both visual wrap and visual weave. Is that correct?
That's right. Yes.
So if I want
Yeah.
to find those, I just go on YouTube and search David Boyle visual wrap or David Boyle visual
Exactly.
weave. Okay.
And that's how I explain to people. So, um, to your first point, it runs on Windows.
Hmm.
At the moment, there's no cross-platform version available. Uh, the Some people who are adamant they want to use it on Macs use an emulator, so that is an option at this stage. It's probably an expensive option. It works perfectly on an emulator, but you then have to pay for the emulator and a Windows license, etc.
Yeah.
So I would like to say, the not too distant future, we will have cross-platform functionality and a whole raft of new features, but that's down the track a little. Um, as as Windows has changed every couple of years, Microsoft brings out a new version of Windows,
Right.
and they quite often change some stuff in the background that 99% of people wouldn't be aware of. But as a software developer, it can be a real
They're
headache
they're
because
laying landmines for you, right?
exactly. So what worked perfectly on Friday, there's a Windows update over the weekend, and come Monday, it's broken. And so
Surprise.
these little Easter eggs that are just sent to try us. So what what I've managed to do, I believe, is turn quite a potentially negative situation into a positive,
Hmm.
insofar as um, there are some workarounds required to get um, the software installed onto your Windows machine. I describe those workarounds. I call them tweaks. I
Hmm.
describe this installation document, which step by step explains what to do. But most people are not computer savvy, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And I fully get that. So what I offer is when people purchase the software, I log on remotely to their machine. There's no extra cost to do this. I log on remotely to their machine, and I get them set up. I make sure it's installed properly. I make sure the tweaks are working, and I tidy up things to make sure shortcuts are in the right place and everything is logical and working and there's consistency. So I know I would have to say thousands of installations that I've done with people over the years. Um, I've set them all up practically in exactly the same way. So I know how people's systems are configured.
Right.
In the process of doing that, I've I've met and online spoken to, and occasionally in person and through phone calls spoken to hundreds of rod builders who I never would have otherwise met.
Yeah, that's
And so
cool.
what starts as being probably an inconvenience. Oh, this software doesn't install. Well, they should make it so it's just automatic.
Right.
And if I had the ability, trust me, I would
Yeah, right.
make it just install cleanly. I don't have that ability right now until the next version is available.
Right.
So in the meantime, I've made myself fully available for the last 20 years, fully available to log onto people's machines and help get them sorted out. And in
Yeah.
the process, I've met guys who make lures. I've met guys who um, do 3D printing, which I'm interested as well in.
I'm
And
getting
so it's
interested.
it's
There's
been
been, yeah, that's a recent sort of aha innovation for me. Mark Krause showed me some stuff he was doing with 3D printing that's like got my mind blown, and I'm like, man, I gotta catch up with the current technology. It's pretty impressive some of the things you can do. Well, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
So
And you also do. So I'll just say, you would never say this. The support's awesome. You are personally committed to it. It may be after hours, it may be weekends. Again, you have a family, you have a job, but like you will eventually need some support. In addition to the support packages, you can subscribe to. Like I would give David very high marks for availability and getting stuff sorted out. And you can tell from talking to him, it's a passion project. It's his baby. He loves it, and he does everything he can to make it work. Support is never the issue. If I'm having trouble getting my wraps done at my house with using these tools, they're spectacular. Can we talk a little bit about the wrap sticks too? Because this was brilliant. And this one almost missed me when I first saw them. If you've done these types of weaves and you've seen them multiple patterns from layout to completion, you understand the process, it can make sense, right? Starting from scratch, like if you're someone who's listening and you tuned in because you saw a visual wrap and you saw visual weave and in the description and you knew we were going to be talking about thread art, it can be like you're talking about getting partway through your heart pattern and like, is this even right? Is this going to round off and look right? It can take a leap of faith and some imagination, but you've come up with some practice tools that help you hone your skills and are also help you lay out and demonstrate and practice the techniques with these wrap sticks. Can you talk a little bit about wrap sticks?
yeah, certainly. So a lot of people, they see the finished result. They see an awesome cross wrap on the screen,
Right,
and they think, how do I do this? And
right,
and people try to be really helpful. People will say, oh, just get some dowel and lay down some threads and practice.
right,
Or they'll say, watch this video and do it, or get an offcut of blanks,
right,
some scrap blank, or a cheap rod, and do it there.
right,
But the thing is, when you're a beginner, when you're just starting, there are all these variables. You're not sure what size threads to use. You're not sure whether it makes a difference whether I use a large dowel or a skinny dowel,
right,
or how long should it be. So there's all these, we'll call them degrees of freedom, but there's all these variables that as a beginner can become daunting and can
sure.
actually be a real barrier to entry.
Yep,
So I've always wondered, how do we make it so simple for people to get into cross wraps that it flourishes even further than it is today.
right,
And so that's where the concept of wrap sticks was born. When I mentioned that visual wrap allows you to print true to size, what I've done is come up with some templates, some standard wraps, and in visual wrap, printed out just the layout threads and made that available as a freely downloadable template that you can print out for three sizes of dowels. Once you've printed out those templates, you can wrap them around your dowel, and the template shows you where the layout threads need to go. And so all you then need to do is to put some double-sided tape or some reversed masking tape at either end and start laying down threads. And you start by laying your first threads over the top of the printout that's now on your rod. So it takes all the guesswork out. You don't have to worry about taper offset spacing. You don't have to worry about measuring diameters of stuff and coming up with spacings. It's there for you, ready to go. And it's just like, follow these instructions and you'll end up with a cross wrap.
right.
So
And it's hard to visualize, but imagine a pre-printed template that you follow, even more than the visual wrap template. Literally, you can tape this on a piece of dowel and wrap right over the marks that are on there to help you practice. And it can demystify it. It can make it simple to understand, and it can also help you if you're dedicated. It can really help you become better at your craft by practicing effectively, right? So
that's right.
it's a brilliant tool if you're serious about this, or if you're trying it and you're struggling. No better way than this to sort of again, it's so brilliantly simple. Once you see it, it's almost like, why did no one ever think of that before? Like that makes so much sense, right? But it's a really good idea.
And with the template that prints out, there's a little QR code. So you scan the QR code, and it basically takes you to a YouTube video, which is basically just a screen capture of visual wrap going step by step, this thread followed by that thread. So you
Right.
follow the sequence, and what you see on the screen is what you do on your rod. again, taking out the guesswork. You don't have the guesswork. You don't have to worry about software. You don't have to worry about following, patterns from a book or anything like that.
Right.
It just gets you going.
Yep.
And I guess we put it to the test during the uh, last ICRBE. So in
Hmm.
2023,
Yeah.
we launched the Thread Central Learning Center. The whole concept of the Learning Center was, let's do hands-on demonstrations and show people how to use stuff, how to use new products, how to do techniques which some of us take for granted, but
Yeah.
newbies have never done it before,
Right.
and allow people to walk away from the show and say, "Wow, I've seen it done, but I've
I
also
got
had
it.
a chance of doing
Yeah.
it myself."
Right. Yep.
And so one of the last sessions that we did in the Learning Center was doing cross wraps using the wrap sticks. And I'd have to say that was one of the most popular sessions. It,
Yep.
it went well over time, and I sacrificed the later sessions. Sorry to whoever I bumped off the end of the program, but the people who were involved in doing the wrap sticks were engrossed in it. The guys from the NERBS organization who were helping did a wonderful job assisting people and showing people, some of their tips and tricks, with a bit of one-on-one tuition.
Yep.
And the concept really worked. It, it,
Yeah,
it was
it
great.
did. It was great. I mean, to me, it was a huge add to the already wonderful ICRBE. So, yeah, and it's just again, I hope people can get an idea because this stuff it probably sounds so simple as we're just kind of sitting here talking through it, but it's really once you see it, I think most of us have an aha moment, and it can really help you up your game, right? And get good quickly, get predictable results quickly, and just I gotta believe, Dave, by making the creative part of it fluid and fast and easy, right? And I say easy with quote fingers, relative terms. I think it's going to push innovation, right? Like I already see people, like I feel like side patterns have taken off. That was never something somebody focused on, but now you have the ability to really tweak so much and fiddle around with it. It feels like visual rap and the people who know how to use it have sort of accelerated the game or advanced things, and that's fascinating to me.
Thread arts to me has always been a wonderful aspect and a hugely attractive aspect of rod building.
Mhm.
But there's also been some, um, I guess, pushback from others in the craft when they talk about, well, I only build functional rods.
Mhm.
And
I've heard some of that.
regardless, I um, have tried not to take umbrage at such sentiments, but
Right.
it has led me to, come up with this saying, well, thread art's not a crime. It's um, and those what I've found is those that take the time and the care to do intricate thread work are intricate not only with their thread work, but with
All
how their are
aspects.
laid
Yep.
out.
That's
All
right.
aspects of it. It's not one or the other. It's not build a crappy rod and then do the world's best cross wrap on it. It's not like that.
No.
And I'd like to I guess leave the final word on this topic to something that Dale Clemens wrote in his introduction to custom rod thread art. He says, hand a person a custom made rod, and in almost every instance, one of the first things he looks at is the decorative thread work. I don't mean to imply that this is the only part of the rod to come under close observation, but it's one of the first. It's the eye catcher, the focal point, and rightly or wrongly, the criteria most often used for the initial appraisal of the rod maker's skill. So, so
I'd
like it or
agree
not,
with all of that. Yeah.
you put a decorative wrap on your rod. That's almost sending a signal out to a potential buyer that this is the standard that I aspire to,
Yeah.
and I build a superior product accordingly.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think you're right. It's a great point. You rarely see someone who executes a really great cross wrap that hasn't also executed all other aspects of fit and finish really well, right? And I also, and again, I'm not trying to send umbrage or cast umbrage, right? As just as you're not trying to take any, but there's also an element of I feel like some of the most creative, constant learners that I know are the people that really get into these aspects, and maybe that's just an attitude thing, but this concept of constantly learning, constantly getting better, and that, endless variations and permutations and iterations on these things. Like I like the artistic freshness of it, and I like that a lot of people, and I'm sure someone's listening to this and can think of someone who's an exception to this, but I will tell you that a lot of the people that I know personally that have taken the time and effort and invested in themselves to get really good at this are just kind of high energy, constant learners that are fun, right? And I think it's interesting how over time it's always a disproportionately small number of people that drive a huge percentage of the innovations. So I could even argue that I love seeing this aspect of the craft thrive. Even if some people don't want it, they want to take a purely functional view of their rods and they say it's a race car, it's a fighter jet, I don't want anything else on it. You're right, go for it, build them exactly that way. But I do think there's almost a lot of these folks sometimes break the wedge and sort of drive the innovation and creativity for the whole industry. And as someone who's not particularly creative but can learn a technique and use it once someone else has figured it out, that's very exciting to me because I it keeps it fresh, and I love that we're building different rods now than we were 5 years ago, and that I would like to think that's progress, that not lack of attention span or focus.
100%.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks for sharing that. It's great. It's an absolutely appropriate quote.
To me, the most satisfying thing is seeing the software used in ways that I had never even imagined.
Right.
Um, and that's just the nature of innovation. You give someone a tool and they use it in an unexpected way and have a happy little accident, and suddenly
Right.
they've got a technique. When I launched the software, I had never seen a fade wrap before.
Oh, had you
Um,
not? Oh,
and shading. I'd never seen it before, and as a
oh,
result, it was never built as a feature into the software. I wish I had, because now people tweak the software and do manual shading in there,
yeah,
and obviously come with the brilliant shading schemes that you see all over Facebook and um, social media at the moment. But again, I had never didn't know about fading and shading, didn't build the feature in, but people found a way because
right.
suddenly they had a tool that allowed them to manipulate lines on the screen representing threads, and they found a way of doing it. So,
Yeah,
yeah, the innovation aspects, and to me, that's how we get ahead. We share information, we collaborate, and by doing so, that's how we actually advance. There's
100%. So let's talk a little bit about the threadcentral.net, because that's a resource that's way beyond just Visual Wrap and Visual Weave, although that is the source for those things. Again, threadcentral.net. But how did you and Mary? Because that's the other thing. I'm listening to you talk about collaboration and innovation, and I'm thinking, who better for you to partner with than somebody like Mary McIntyre Christie, who does all this beautiful work and has such an eye for color and fade and contrast and these things. Like, so how did you guys get together on the threadcentral.net project in the first place?
Yeah, sure. So threadcentral.net has been around well before the collaborations. Initially, I had a site called visualwrap.com, and once I then launched Weave, I thought, well, people aren't going to know where to find the Weave, and I didn't want to run separate every time I come up with a new product, have a new
Sure.
domain name
Right.
and a new location. And this was well before the time of social media. So coming up with your own website was basically the only way to get the information out there. So I thought I need an umbrella site. And so the name Thread Central came to me, and threadcentral.com was taken. So I took threadcentral.net, and net fishing seemed to go together. So Thread
100%. Right.
Central.net started its life as a bulletin board in a similar manner than that rodbuilding.org is a chat board.
Okay.
Um, Back in the early days, there was a proliferation of chat boards, and you had various different topics, and each topic expanded into its own discussion thread,
Right.
and people could post questions
Right.
or answers or whatever.
Right.
So I had one discussion thread set up for Visual Wrap, one for Visual Weave. I then had step-by-step sections on that site, and also some sections for rod building clubs.
Okay.
Back then, I was running Sydney Rod Builders Club, which I started, and ran for 18 months. There was space for the Melbourne Rod Building Club. In the early days, even the Nerves was hosted there. So it was the starting place for a number of social gathering sort of.
I don't think I knew that. That's interesting.
Yeah, and I've got the original incarnation of Thread Central and that bulletin board. As in the mid 2000s, it basically got hacked, and I had to pull it down.
Okay.
But interestingly, there's a website called, I think it's timemachine.org, or afterwards I'll find what it's called.
Yeah.
You can actually look at archived versions of websites, and I can visit Thread Central as an archived version back in the mid 2000s, and I can show you what it looked like. It at its peak, it had thousands of posts there, and thousands of views on the step-by-step how to do wraps. Lots of progression pics,
Interesting.
lots of comparisons between what it looks like in visual wrap compared to what it looks like in real life. And there was quite a bit of collaboration starting there. So over time, as I say, I had to take that bulletin board down because of malicious activity.
Yeah.
Once that was down, I had to reinvigorate the site. And as I did so, realized that I love doing this, but passion doesn't pay the bills in many cases. I
Yep.
need to, have, well, in some cases it does. I needed a way of
That's a
selling
topic
my.
for a different podcast, so we're not covering that today.
Sorry, wrong podcast. So I needed a way of having a way to download my software. Initially, we weren't selling downloads, but as technology has progressed, downloads became the way to sell the software. So I needed a way of selling the software, but it also struck me that, yeah, this is fun and all, but if I was doing it with others, it would just increase my sense of satisfaction, because
Sure.
I like being successful myself, but I also love collaborating with people and see their success, and we achieve joint success together. To me, that's what it's all about.
Right.
So,
Win-win. Right.
yeah, win-win. I mean, that's the whole idea. And certainly what I was seeing from my limited view of the rod building market was a lot of competing activities, a lot of competing rod builders, a lot of competing products,
Right.
and as a result, that was, as I saw it, somewhat stifling to innovation.
100%. Yeah.
I really thought collaborations where it needs to be. So
I think it's still, I think you're right. And I think it is where it needs to be still. Right. Yeah.
yeah. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to work out how to make my site a commercial site, but also a collaborative commercial site to
Right.
allow others to sell their products through my site. So I started that, and had an initial collaboration going, which was great for a while. I envisioned Thread Central as being the meeting place for anything decorative for
Yep.
rods. Certainly thread art initially, but later, if it goes that way, then anything decorative to do with rods.
Yep.
So we've started selling the software, collaborated to sell threads and EVA, etc. As we've gone through, I guess the nature of the relationship was such that I could see Mary was doing her teaching, and I thought, man, that's hitting the nail on the head for me about what needs to happen to grow
Right.
this industry even further. People
Yep.
need to be taught.
Yep.
Obviously, we have Mudhole with their learning program, which
Mm-hmm.
by all accounts is fantastic,
Yep.
and is opening up the market for everyone. I
Yep.
could see Mary teaching in a very specific way, and I thought it would be great to have Mary on this site. She had a new dimension.
Yep.
And so I reached out, said, how about it? Do you think this might work? Is this in line with what you have in mind for your future? And we spoke about it, and it turned out we came to an agreement about how to make it work. So where we stand today is all of Mary's online learning courses are available through the Thread Central website. You go on, you choose the course that you would like. You purchase it for any varying from $10 to $30, depending on which course it is.
Sure.
You then that enrolls you into the course, and you can revisit that course as many times as you want. The courses consist of videos and some written pages and some pictures. It's like any sort of e-learning or online learning, and you can revisit any of those courses that you've purchased infinitely. There was a migration process to set up all of those courses on the site, and I had to do extensive back end work to bend the
Make it work. Yeah.
websites to
Yeah.
accommodate it,
Right.
but it works now, and it's so we now have the ability to do e-learning via the Thread Central website. And as we've gone on, we meet regularly just to talk about the nature of the collaboration, what's
Right.
working, what could be tweaked, and possible new products and possible new directions. The thing that I've found is that we can never sit back on our laurels.
Yeah.
It's not to have a product and sit back and expect it to be there unless we're pushing the envelope ourselves. So
Absolutely.
through the collaboration, I'm able to have those discussions about new techniques, new ideas for products, and we try a lot of stuff in the background, and a lot of it doesn't work. But that's the nature of experimentation and innovation. You
Right.
try, ideas, and if one or two of them come off, they can come off spectacularly,
Yeah, and
and
that's
everyone's
success,
the
right?
winner.
Yeah. You don't count your failures, you count your successes. That's right.
That's it.
Yeah, and
So
if you're not familiar with threadcentral.net, so you've got all the visual wrap, visual weave software, all the support, you've got the pattern libraries, you've got all that. You have all of Mary McIntyre Christie's courses. That's who we've been talking about. She's a Foundation Outdoor Group, Mudhole and American Tackle Pro staff member. They have clothing, some really good looking branded clothing and things. But they also have, this is a hardcore passion project for Mary and for Dave, and they have, specific. You can get Mary's thread packing tool there. You can get circle templates and decorative wrap, kind of butt wrap alignment jigs and fixtures there. You can get the kind of pins Mary uses. So this very specific by brand double-sided tape she likes for popsicle sticks and whatnot for the way she teaches the wrap. So it's really kind of an integrated thing in that if you go on there and you learn anything or buy any of these products, like if you take Mary's classes, everything you need to do it just like she does it is on there, right? If you buy these visual weave, you get visual wrap, all the support, all the pattern libraries, all that stuff there. And it's a really great website. As I mentioned, Dave and Mary both have shared accounts like decorative threadcentral.net accounts. Then Mary also has some decorative studio stuff. Dave's got visual wrap, visual weave. So if you're into this, if you're really into decorative thread art, you already know all about these people, and none of this is a surprise. And it's just been kind of fun for you to get to know Dave a little bit today. But if you haven't seen this stuff, I really encourage you to check all of it out because it is as deep and wide and sort of dense kind of concentration of content specifically focused on this topic as you're going to find anywhere in the world, literally. And what they have online goes way, way, way beyond anything you can get from the books. And look, I've got all the Dale Clemens books. I've got the Tom Kirkman book. I've got the C. Boyd Pfeiffer Tactical Craft book. I've got Billy Pavona's book, and they're all great. And they all are absolutely worth your time and attention. But the kind of sheer weight and volume of content and quality of content that they're starting to concentrate and sort of accumulate at threadcentral.net and is really impressive. So if this is a topic that you're interested in and lucky you if you're new to this and you're looking for more people and more resources and you want to get dialed in, then boy, you just hit the mother load because you could hardly start with anybody better than Dave and the threadcentral.net as a resource. So Dave, super wonderful conversation. I really appreciate it. Again, everything we've talked about can be found at threadcentral.net. You can look up Dave's, Visual Wrap Users Group on Facebook. Just search Visual Wrap Users Group. And on YouTube, you can search, David Boyle Visual Wrap, David Boyle Visual Weave. You'll find his channels there. And there's just I think people sometimes may sleep on the amount of content that's out there, but there's a lot. And you have a lot of video content on the threadcentral.net website also. So you can see exactly how all these products work before you buy them. You can literally be walked step by step through a process, how they work, how to install them, how to tweak them if necessary, how to use them. It's just a really, really great resource. And the rod building community thanks you, Dave. And I'm you've gotten me excited. This makes me want to almost go do a weave or almost go do a closed decorative thread wrap. Your enthusiasm is contagious, and it makes me excited about the tools all over again, even though they're not new to me personally, and I've relied on them heavily for a long time. But thank you so much for taking the time to be here. And I have to ask, just because this is fascinating. Congratulations. You have a recent kind of promotion and job change, and you're going to be heading back down under. Do we find you today here in stateside? Are you in Australia as we're recording this?
Today, stateside,
Today's still
and
stateside. All right. Subject to
in
change any day now, right? Yeah,
in the not too distant future,
that's right.
I'll be offline for a while, and it'll probably take me a little while to adjust to the 38 degrees Celsius, which is probably 100 and something degrees
100 and
Fahrenheit
too much.
temp
100 and too
temperatures that
much.
are being experienced in Brisbane.
Yeah,
So
you've gotten
in a short
soft in
period
this
of time,
American
I'll be
climate. Yeah. Oh man. Well, congratulations on the new opportunity. I hope it doesn't distract you or take you away too much from all you do for the rod building community because it's great. And it's gotten for me to be a highlight of the ICRBE. I always come find you and look you up, and we try to catch up. And if those of you who know Dave, he's just a sweetheart of a nice guy, super nice guy. Enjoy hanging out with him. Liked getting to hang out with his son Finn last year, but based on the move, are you going to make it to ICRBE this year? Or is it going to be too much?
this, this year, no. I
Uh,
think my starting day is probably the weekend
oh
of the
gosh.
ICRBE.
Yeah, of course it
But
is, right? Like,
yeah, watch that space.
yeah.
Yeah,
All right. Well, we will. We'll raise a pint in your honor, my friend, and you will be sorely missed. But hopefully, we'll have you back the year after, and um, someone can continue to carry the torch and represent visual wrap and visual weave and continue your education. You're the Pied Piper of thread one of the Pied Pipers of thread decorative techniques, and we really appreciate it.
we'll really appreciate the time today. And I just have to say thank you very much for all the support you've given over the years. Last year, when launching the Thread Central Learning Centre, Anglers Resource was one of the key sponsors and was involved in a huge way in the background. And the thing that struck me most and inspired me most was your attitude towards collaboration and growing the pie for everyone. It was not a case of
Absolutely.
competition. It was a case of, a rising tide lifts all boats.
That's it.
And you basically put your money where your mouth was and made it happen. And I fully appreciate that. So thank you very much for
Oh,
your participation in that and your ongoing friendship. I really
that's the most flattering possible version of events. Thank you for that. But yeah, no, I was happy to help. I do think collaboration is the thing, and I get excited about it. And I think I don't have this conversation with a lot of people, but I've done a lot of research on it, and I'm very interested in the topic. And when we look at something like, and I would consider these close analogs, right? But like if you look at how many people fly fish, and then the percentage of those that tie flies, or if you look at, I don't know, how many people shoot and how many people reload their own ammo, we have not scratched the surface of how many people build rods relative to how many people fish, right? So, and I just think the more we grow the community and the more we grow the craft, there's going to be awesome innovations. There's going to be awesome new technologies and opportunities, and it's hard for me to imagine a life without rod building. Like it has been so much for me, and so much of my joy outside of my family has come via this rod building community. So I was flattered to be asked to help support it. It was a brilliant idea. You did a great job with it, and I appreciate you letting us participate. And I look forward to whatever it is you do next, because I'm sure it's going to be wonderful. So get your feet under you in Australia, and and let me know once the creative wheels are spinning again. I can't wait to see what's next.
Good on you, Bill. Thank you
Awesome.
very much.
Well, and thanks everybody for tuning in. Again, please like and subscribe and download wherever you get your podcast content. And we'll see you next time. You got a Aussie slang goodbye for us, Dave?
See you around like a rissole, mate.
There we go. There we go. This was Blinder. See you later, you bogan and yabos. We'll see you next time on the Mastering Rod Building Podcast.
That's going to wrap it up for this week. But if you'd like to be notified as soon as all new podcasts are released, just text the word fishing to 587-317-6099. We'll add you to our email list so you can stay up to date. Thanks for listening.